Welcome to Reason Workshop. This is the introduction lesson that goes over what all the classes will be. Each one is on a different aspect of this program Reason. So for class 1, let's look at just the Reason basics. So we start out with the registration. After that, we'll go through all the preferences, the control surfaces and settings. And then we'll go through the consolidated windows and the way the layout works of Reason. And then we'll go through the keyboard shortcuts. And after that, the menus and the Reason cache. And then we'll go through the Reason factory sound bank, or various refills, where all of the sounds are stored. Then we'll go through file types, the rewire, and then a test. Class 2 covers the entirety of the mixing window, starting out with opening a template, the entire channel overviews, the input and the dynamics, then the high pass and low pass filters, the parametric EQ, then the insert and bus effects, then the fading and panning section, and then the master faders as the master inserts, and then finally the master compressor. Class 3 goes through recording and MIDI automation. We're going to start out and create these different devices. So after recording in MIDI Live Audio Basics, we're going to go through all the devices within Reason. After that, we'll cover the transport, play, rewind functions, and everything on the transport. After that, we'll go through multiple lanes in MIDI recording and what the functionality is of that. Then after that, we'll go through recording automation, and then we'll have a test. Class 4 covers recording audio. This goes through audio recording input and tuner, then through loop recording. Then after that, we'll do comp editing, multiple takes, and editing functions. After that, we'll do record source here. And then finally, we'll use a clip inspector to do transposing and volume adjustments. And then number 5, we'll go through MIDI sequencing and effects, starting out with quantization, then the regroove mixer. Then we'll go through blocks mode. Then we'll cover the effects types and all the different modules of effects within Reason, and then we'll have a test. Class 6 covers the sequencer more close up. We'll go through a basic layout and song and edit modes and zoom tools. Then we'll go through the sequencer toolbar, the tool overview, snap controls, and then additional toolbar features. We'll also go over the tool window. We'll cover all the capabilities within the tool window. Class 7, we'll go through creating and managing tracks in Reason. Start out by creating, deleting, and duplicating tracks in Reason. Then we'll go through moving tracks, then editing your MIDI performances. Next is drawing and erasing MIDI data and controller information. After that, we'll go through recording and audio performance and editing audio performance and creating and editing blocks. Class 8 goes through sampling. So here are the sampling input connections. Sample, just like that, and then how to bounce clips to new samples, and then furthermore how to edit your samples. Then we'll go through assigning samples and on all the different devices, and we'll have a test. Class 9, we'll start out with basic rhythm skills, sticks and line keyboard playing, and then into time notation, note duration, and measures. Then we'll go through reading rhythms. And finally, drum programming with your newly learned rhythm techniques. Class 10 goes over ReDrum really close up. We'll start out with a tour of the whole ReDrum interface, then browsing and loading patches. Then we'll go through the 10 ReDrum channels and the differences between them all. After that, we'll go through the ReDrum programmer, where you can sequence beats and how edit steps work. Then the different ins and outs, as well as shifting between patterns and banks with automation. Next is copying patterns to track. Class 11 goes over the ID8 and basic melody skills. We'll start out with ID8 patch overview. Then we'll go through the staff, clef, and ledger lines. Then we'll go through a column response between two notes for basic melody skills. We'll cover steps and accidentals, pitch theory, and next we'll go through simple melodies. Class 12 covers the subtractor analog synthesizer, starting out looking at the analog oscillators and oscillation types, then the filter section, then the modulation section, then the play parameters, and then finally the CV and audio connections. We'll end up programming a patch from scratch. Class 13 covers the matrix. We'll start out exploring the matrix pattern and sequence features, going into edit mode. We'll also cover the octaves, velocity, and ties. Then we'll go through steps, resolution, and shuffle. Then we'll cover the matrix curve window. And finally, we'll cover matrix connections. Class 14 goes through rhythm skills 2, starting out with restoration, followed by column response keyboard loops. Then we'll go through dots and ties, then more in-depth on drum programming, melody reading, then going through simple and compound time signatures, and then odd meter time signatures. Then drum programming and a test. Class 15 covers Kong. Starts out with browsing, loading, and saving patches, and then goes through the pad section, linking, alternate hits, mutes, and then goes to the drum control panel. After that, the drum modules and all the different kinds of drum modules that are available. Then we'll go through the drum effect slots. And finally, Kong connections on the back of Kong. Class 16 covers scales and technique, starting out with major and minor scales and their theory. Then we'll do some column response and ear training tests. Then we'll go over scale degrees and key signatures, and then finally ending with proper scale technique. Class 17 covers the mouse drum, grain table synthesis, and the oscillation types, and the routing and output, and covering the filter section, and the modulation section, then the play parameters, and the CV connection, and finally programming a patch and saving it. Class 18 goes through the tour of Octorex, Rex files and recycle, and then getting into the sounds of Octorex. We'll check out all the synth parameters of Octorex, going into the slice edit mode, then sequencing with the Octorex, then pattern to track and editing your MIDI notes as slices, then playing and performing with the Octorex, and finally covering the Octorex connections on the back. Class 19 goes through basic harmony skills. We're going to cover generic intervals, diatonic parallel harmony, grooves with harmony in column response, cover specific intervals, then go through an ear training test, ways of writing those intervals, then interval inversion, and finally a written test. Class 20 covers Thor, Polysonic synthesizer, full tour of Thor. Then we'll cover the controller, then the programmer, next the modulation bus, and then the step sequencer. We'll cover the audio and CV connections. Next, we'll build a bass patch from scratch. After that, we'll program a pad sound from scratch. And then last, we'll cover the routing audio through Thor. Next, Class 21 covers an introduction to chords. We'll start out covering triads. Then I'll show you a bunch of rhythm skank patterns. Then some basic triad ear training. And then we'll cover triad inversions. After that, we'll have more skank and stab patterns. We'll cover triad inversion ear training. Next, we'll go through diatonic triads, Roman numeral analysis, and then more diatonic ear training. Class 22 covers the RPG8 arpeggiator. Start by connecting the RPG8 and what MIDI to CV means. We'll go through the whole arpeggiator section, then the pattern editor, and finally a test. Class 23 covers the NN19. We'll start out with basic sampling and single samples versus multi-samples. After that, we'll go through loading patches and loading samples. Then we'll cover the keyboard display as well as the synth parameters of NN19. Then we'll go through the play parameters and how to sample audio, and then finally creating and saving an NN19 patch. Class 24 goes through the NNXT. We'll start out with just the front panel of the NNXT and then go through the remote editor. We'll cover the sample parameters, the root, tune, start, and end. Then we'll cover zones and layering. Next, we'll create a multi-layered NNXT patch. And finally, cover the NNXT connections on the back. Class 25 covers the basic effects. We're going to go through all the basic effects. Reverb, delay, foldback, distortion, envelope controlled filter, all those little half-rack devices, as well as all the mixers. Class 26 goes through the advanced effects. The vocoder. Here's the BV512 vocoder. Next, the Scream 4 sound destruction unit. Here's the RV7000 digital reverb. Then the Spider audio and CV merger and splitter. Next, the Echo delay. Here's the Alligator filter pattern generator. Next is the Pulverizer compressor distortion filter. Here's the Neptune, which is a pitch correction and MIDI voice synth. And finally, we have the guitar and bass line 6 pods. Class 27 covers the M-Class effects, which is the M-Class equalizer, the M-Class stereo imager, the M-Class compressor, and the M-Class maximizer. Class 28 goes through the combinator. We'll start out with a whole combinator overview, how to combine instruments, how to use it as a performance instrument. Then we'll cover the controller panel, then the programmer. Then we'll go through routing audio and routing CV and creating a combinator patch. Next, we'll cover setting key ranges and velocity ranges of the instruments within a combinator, running pattern devices, modulation routing, and finally selecting a backdrop for the combinator. And that is an overview of this entire Reason workshop. It might seem a little daunting, but we'll go through piece by piece and break this whole thing down for you.